In our sexually confused age today, we have so many different variants on how people think that they should live sexually. And really, the main rule is do whatever you want. Whatever you want to do sexually is fine. And we see this infiltrating the church in a lot of different ways. But one way that's becoming kind of common is young Christians hooking up before they're married, but they've already kind of said, well, you know, in God's eyes, we're married. And if you look back at the Bible, really, there wasn't always these weddings to say that we're married together. So in God's eyes, we're really married. But you see, the problem is this doesn't take into account what the Bible actually teaches about sexual ethics. All right, first, sex was created by God. It brings glory to God. It is a good thing. But God has also set up for us the parameters for how it is to be exercised. We see it right there at the beginning in the Garden of Eden. God made one man, he made one woman, and they come together in sexual union in a covenantal marriage before God, in which they become one flesh for the rest of their lives. And as we trace out the sexual ethic throughout the rest of the Bible, really that same ideal, that same standard runs throughout all of the Bible, even in the nomadic society of Genesis. So when Isaac needs a wife, what happens is Abraham sends someone to go find him a suitable wife, and the two families agree upon this marriage. So the community comes together and recognizes that these two individuals are becoming husband and wife. It's not just two individuals who get together in a tent and decide they're married, and therefore God recognizes it as marriage. Moreover, throughout the Bible, we have this term of sin called sexual immorality. And sexual immorality is not just limited to adultery. There's actually a different term for adultery. Sexual immorality is any sexual actions that happen outside that context of a covenantal, one man, one woman, for life marriage. So we have this broader category throughout the Bible that describes sexual sin. And there's actually a couple examples, one in the Old Testament and one in the New, that show us quite clearly that two people consensually having sex doesn't constitute a marriage. The first we find is in Exodus chapter 22. God gives commands to Israel. What do we do if a man seduces a virgin and they have intercourse? Are they therefore married? And the law is that man is to pay the bride price to the family, but he doesn't get her as a wife necessarily. That's up to the family to decide. So he has to pay the bride price no matter what, and then the family gets to decide whether or not he actually gets to marry the woman. So clearly, them having consensual sex was not a justification, or they were not therefore married, because the family could then say no. The community has to come together, and the couple has to come together and recognize this as a union before man and God. And then we also have in John chapter 4, Jesus is talking to the woman at the well, and he says to her, you have had 5 husbands up to this point, and the one you're with now isn't your husband. So Jesus says to this woman, you're living with this man as if he's your husband, but he's not your husband. So it's very clear that in Old Testament and New Testament that two people coming together sexually does not constitute a marriage. So what does? Well, as I've already alluded to, what constitutes a marriage is one man, one woman, for life, and they pledge that unity or that covenant, they pledge that before the community and before God, that they will be husband and wife for life. That is the sexual ethic of the Bible. It's clear from the very first pages, and it runs all the way throughout the entire Bible, Old Testament and New. And that is what Christians should strive to live up to, except in extreme circumstances, a marriage is between one man and one woman, and it is to never end except in those extreme exceptions that Jesus mentions in the Gospels. And that union of male and female brings glory to God, and it is for our good. So that is what every Christian should strive for in this sexually confused age.